Hello there and welcome to the Card Grotto. Today I've got a card to share with you where I'm changing the shape of a die cut. So let's get started. This is the Hero Arts Circle Set Fancy Dies. You get two in the set, one larger and one smaller, and I'm going to be using the larger one today. And it's a really cool die because you can use it in lots of different ways. You can use it to kind of like do die cut inlay with all of those little pieces around the edge, but I'm simply cutting it from some white cardstock, popping out all of those pieces, which I said I think would look really good doing die cut inlay. And I'm actually going to cut off that piece around the outside edge, and I'm going to use it as a sun. So I thought this was quite a good way to use it. I still think it would look good as a sun even with that kind of outside edge, but I thought it would be really quite quick and easy just for me to cut it off. And the great thing about sun rays is that they don't all need to be the exact same length. So I'm actually trying to cut some of these a little bit shorter and some a little bit longer, so that it just adds a little bit more interest onto the sun. So I'm just going around the outside edge, cutting some of those down, and then I've removed that outside piece, and it was really quick and easy to do. I don't often change the shape of die cuts, but this one definitely I thought it would look really good to do so. I have adhered that down onto an Altenew sticky mat, and that's just going to hold it in place while I add the ink on top. I could have just cut it from some yellow cardstock, but I thought it'd be a little bit nicer because it's such a clean and simple card to add a little bit of interest onto this die cut with ink blending. So I'm going in with my first shade here, which is Hero Arts Dandelion Core Ink, and I'm using an extra large ink blending brush. I'm then going to bring in Butterbar Core Ink from Hero Arts, and this is just a little bit darker in shade, and I'm going to focus most of this colour towards the inside of that sun, and I'm using a medium blending brush here just to help me focus that colour a little bit more towards the centre. I probably could have got away with not actually using this colour, but I did want to transition colour between the next one that I used, which is Papaya. So this is a little bit more of an orangey tone. So I'm going to go in with that just in the centre to really darken that up a little bit. And then I've got the lighter outside edges of those sun rays. So I am just going to bring in the dandelion ink again, just to go around the outside edges, make sure that I get a really nice smooth transition between the different colours. I'm then taking the Hero Arts Nesting Cloudy Infinity dies, and I'm taking two of the smaller ones and I'm going to die cut them from some white cardstock. So I'm just holding them down with some low tack tape, and I can run those through my die cutting machine. But while I'm doing my die cutting machine, I'm going to bring in a piece of pitch black cardstock, and I'm going to cut the friend word from the Hero Arts Friend Words Fancy Die set. So again, I'm just taking some low tack tape, and then I can hold that in place and run that through my die cutting machine. And I've cut two each of the clouds, and I'm adhering those together just to add a little bit of extra dimension onto the card. It is really quite clean and simple, so I think it's quite nice having different dimensions of kind of elements on the card. And then for the sentiment, I'm doing 3 die cuts high for that. So adding dabs of the glue. My glue is really quite runny, so it is a little bit kind of all over the place. So I am dabbing that off on a piece of scrap paper, and then I can pop the other ones on top. So like I said, that's going to be 3 die cuts high. And then I can just go around the outside edges to make sure I can remove any of that glue, but it does dry completely clear. For an accompanying sentiment, I'm taking the Giving a Sunflower digital download. I don't use digital elements very often on my cards. I struggle with the printer ink and colouring and things like that, but it is quite good for accompanying sentiments. In this case, I wanted one that said Sending Sunshine to work with the sun that I have created, and this set was perfect. So I printed it onto a kind of standard sized American sized piece of cardstock, which is 8.5 inches by 11 inches. But when I was printing it, I changed the printer size to A5 so that I could have the images be slightly smaller, in particular the sentiments, because I wanted it to fit into this die, which is the Hero Art Sentiment Strips Fancy die, and I thought it'd be quite good to cut it out in a strip. I want to add a bit more stability onto this sun because I know that I'm going to have it overhang the card base. I could have done this originally and done all three and then did the ink blending on top, but I thought it was probably easier for me to do kind of one at a time. So I'm adding some precision glue onto this piece here, and then I'm going to pop the one that I've added the ink blending on top, just trying to kind of line it up because all of those sun rays are slightly different. It did take me a little while just to kind of figure out which way this was supposed to go round. So I found like an area where it kind of was sort of more noticeable of how to line it up. So I did like one tiny little strip in the center and then two kind of bigger ones on the two outside edges. That's just how I personally found it easier to line up. And then I'm going to go around it with those scissors to cut it down. And again, I could have done, I'm going to do 3 layers of this, and I could have just, or like 2 extra layers I suppose on the back of this ink blended one, so it'll be 3 altogether. I could have just done it all in one go, but I honestly thought it would be easier for my scissors to cut it out one at a time, and I think it probably would have been. So now I've got my sun image here, I can add some more precision glue onto the back of that, and then I can pop that down onto an A2 size white card base. So this is a finished size of 4.25 inches by 5.5 inches, and I am going to have those sun rays overhanging the card base. I could cut the card base down and make it a little bit smaller, which is what I often do if I know that I'm going to overhang elements, but I decided in this instance I wanted the card to be that kind of 4.25 inches by 5.5 inch size, so I'll just have to create a kind of custom envelope for this to fit in, but that's okay. So I'm just figuring out where I want all of my elements to be before I stick them down, and then I can add the clouds with the liquid glue. So just popping one at the top there and one at the bottom kind of on the left hand side. And then I felt that I needed a little bit of extra support on that right hand side where it's overlapping the card base. So I added a little bit of thin foam tape onto that. And then I can pop some foam tape. This is kind of traditional thickness foam tape, I suppose, just on that end where it's going to overhang onto the card. So the rest of it is kind of overhanging on the die cut, so it's all going to be kind of one level, and the bits that where the cloud is going to be a little bit higher, but I found it was perfectly fine for this die cut to kind of overhang them slightly. And then I did add some foam tape onto the back of that sentiment strip and pop that underneath. And then to finish off, I'm adding some clear Hero Hues enamel dots and just popping a few of those onto the clouds. I thought that they kind of looked a little bit like raindrops, and I thought it kind of worked with more of the sort of sun and clouds theme. So using a pokey tool here just to help me place them down. And ordinarily I tend to work in odd numbers with embellishments, but I decided that I felt like I needed another one there at the top, so it ended up with 4. I just have to try and live with the fact that it's an even number and not an odd number, but it's an odd number at the top and kind of an odd number at the bottom, so I'm trying to make it so that that's okay in my mind. So that is the card finished for today. I really love how it turned out. It's really quite clean and simple, but I do like how I changed the shape of that die cut slightly just to fit it to my needs of what I wanted for the card. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar on YouTube and also over on my blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.